for those that love the big bait, the swim bait game, all that, I know we got a crowd and we always got to bring the big bait in. And usually when we're going to talk big baits and swim baits, I usually like to have an expert in to answer the knowledge and quench the thirst of the audience. So we're going to bring in one of the OG swim bait makers. He's not just a bait maker, inventor, but he's also quite an angler. He knows quite a bit about fishing swim baits as well. So I think we're gonna have some fun tonight. So we're gonna talk to Big Mike, Mr. Bull Shad, Mike Bucca. What's going on, Mike?
Going on, man. Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, that's awesome. We actually talked about this. I guess the only time we've met has been at the last two classics in person. Um, but that's a challenging time because that's one of your busy shows. You're in high demand at the classics. Like that's a busy place standing in front of the Bull Shad booth.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, the Classic is one of our busiest events by far. It's actually the busiest. We've been doing the Classic for 6, 7 years now, and it's always an event, and it's always challenging to get to the event sometimes, with the amount of baits and stuff that we bring. We try not to drive if we don't have to, but sometimes it requires it it depends on where it's at. If you have a
Mhm.
if you have a show here in the South, which is where most of them are, the show is extremely good. Than the ones out west, but yeah, we enjoy doing the Classic. It's usually the last one of the year that we do, so it's a lot of fun. It's the best show out there as far as I'm concerned, as far as for vendors and stuff. It's expensive, but worth it. Worth
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. Walton Doyle says, "What's up?"
Hey, what's up, guys? How y'all doing?
Brian says, "We sound good, look good." Well, as good as we can look for a couple of old fishermen.
Hey, Jim.
But yeah, so we're going to talk swim baits. We're going to talk big baits, talk about a few things. As always, HellaBass Live is presented by Arsenal Fishing, boosted by Powerhouse Lithium. I know I don't talk about it much. I guess the actual code, but people do use the code HB10 to save themselves 10% on Powerhouse Lithiums. That's down in the description too if you want it. But yeah, Mike and I talked about it. He's hasn't done a ton of streams, but I've always kind of wanted to have you on and kind of got the technology figured out. So if you've met Mike in person, he doesn't hear the greatest, but with technology, it's actually a little easier to have this conversation than. So here we are, leveraging technology to have a live stream, and I think it's gonna be a great opportunity for a bunch of our audience to get some questions asked about bull shads, big swim baits in general, baits, line setups, all that type of stuff. I got some people hanging on Real Talk Bassin on Instagram, so all kinds of people tuning in. So I guess a little history, Mike. Like, how does one become a master scientist when it comes to big baits, and what was the path to get here?
I started off as a guide, actually, here in Georgia, and I happen to live near Atlanta area, and due to our proximity to Atlanta, I live on one of the busiest, if not the busiest, Corps of Engineer lake in the entire United States. It gets the most visited, the most pressure. There's tournaments every night. Um, Winter seems like, especially in the summer, um, it gets hammered. And I've done some work out there with the DNR, and one of the things that the DNR always said is it's unreal the amount of pressure. And he showed me several fish. He says, "You see this here on the marks when you have a lot of jaw injuries, and 90% of your fish have jaw injuries. That's people catching fish." So I had a weird situation. We had extremely pressure. My home lake, if you catch 10, 12 pounds, you're in the money. That's five. Just to give you an idea, it's mostly spotted bass. Um,
Altoona? Is that what you're talking
so
about?
just to give a little bit of background, that's the kind of things that I was dealing with pressure wise and guiding on this lake full time. So I had to be a little bit innovative in trying to figure out ways to catch these bigger fish. Um, I used to catch a couple of 5 pound spots a year, um, prior to swim baits. I said, well, what do I got to do to catch these bigger fish? So I said, well, let's think about this. If I go smaller, I'm just going to catch some more smaller fish. So what happens if I go bigger? And while I didn't kill the fish, I got a lot more consistent in catching those bigger fish. And that got my wheels turning a little bit. And I happen to know a lot of people out west that do swim baits and stuff. And I said, well, let's try some bigger baits. And if you remember back 15, 16 years ago, they didn't even have shad swim baits. All it was basically based out of California. It was all trout. And, you know, the Huddleston and the Slammers and the Castex and all those, that's all you had back then. So they were kind of neglected out here. But anyway, they hit the trout swim baits. And that's one of the things we alluded to. You don't necessarily have to have the forage that is in your lake and throw swim baits that mimic. So I have some lakes here that don't have any shad in them, smaller lakes, but they hit 9-inch gizzard shads, swim baits pretty well. So that's what got my wheels turning and trying to make my own because they weren't available. And that was a learning process in itself. You know, there was no YouTube back then to look up and how to make a swim bait. So you were pretty much on your own. And so that's how I got started, as you know, and like I said, I got more consistent in catching the bigger fish. So I felt this was something that a lot of other people here locally were not throwing. And it's kind of like, you know, if you fish a pond over and over and over and over and over again, those fish get conditioned to those baits by throwing something bigger out there and also realistic. It seemed to resonate with the fish, and it resonated 16 years ago, and here we are today. But that, you know, when I first started, you know, my goal was not to start a company to sell swim baits. My goal was to help my clients catch more fish. And as I was doing fishing reports back on the Bass Fishing homepage, I mean, that was the very first internet fishing forage page out there. That was prior to the Bass Pro Central, which was spring off of the Bass Fishing homepage. People saw that I was doing very well here in the South that was working out there on the West Coast. And people flew in and asking questions. And one of the book trips, I would go to gas stations and say, hey, you're the swim bait guy. And I would cut a bait off my rod, give it to them. You know, and it just got to be a very vicious cycle, guiding, make baits, guiding, sweep, make baits. And it got to the point where, dude, this is really, I mean, I can only guide as one person, but I can make more baits and be more productive as making baits than I could guiding. So I got to that point where I said, well, do I guide or do I make baits? You know, I said, well, let's try the bait thing, you know, and see how it goes. If it doesn't work, I can always go back to guiding. And 16 years ago, here we am, you know, it's just taken off and it's resonated. And I've had some people on the way, even shop owners. One of my very best shop owners says, Mike, you're not going to be able to sell a $50 swim bait and make it. He says, you're crazy. You might sell some, but I didn't know either until I tried it, you know. And so that's basically how I got started. I didn't plan on making this stuff for a living. It just happened to be that way, you know. And they've always said that, you know, if you do what you love, you never work another day in your life. And that is so true. And I will also say that you don't get to fish a lot if you're in the fishing industry, because I feel like that if I left my foot off the gas, you know, something might come in behind me and take over, you know. So I'm always in the shop. I'm spread out a little thin, to be honest with you, you know, but I always try to stay in the shop a lot. But I also want to make sure that the baits are doing what they're supposed to do. I do my own testing. I think I got away from that a lot, and I'm now getting back to that again. I got out of fishing there for a little while because I just couldn't keep up. Now that I've got more people in there and I got a general manager, I can step out a little bit more and get back into the fishing side of things. And because I'm one of the very few, I should say, builders that really has a reputation as a fisherman as well. I think that's extremely important because you need to be able to speak to your baits, not just be able to be a bait builder, but you also need to be a good fisherman and being able to catch a lot of fish on your own baits. And that helps me be a better builder as well, because the one thing I've learned over the years is it's easy to build a bait. It's a lot harder to build a bait that's really good, that catches like nothing. And what are those intricacies that you find that really turns off a bait, turns a good bait into a great bait? And there's a lot of little things you can do to the bait and see how it reacts and get feedback from other people as well. I'll take the Bull Shad, for example. One of the best attributes of that bait is you can reel it really fast. And that is one of the reasons why the Bull Shad does very well, is that it's a very fast retrieve bait compared to a lot of the other ones. If you reel it slow, it's not as productive as if you reel it really fast. I've had several instances. There was a guy in Texas that's won a boat or two and several big tournaments on Texas. And he bought his baits full price from me. And, I've never asked anything, pictures or any kind of accolades or anything from him. But I met him at ICAST, and he says, Mike, even if I told him what bait I was using, it still wouldn't help him. And that is when the lights went off. I said, I knew exactly what he was talking about. He was talking about the speed, because he's doing these things, he's burning them on top. And that is what triggers those fish. And he was exactly right when he said that. And there's been a couple of other instances with a couple of YouTubers and stuff, they were struggling. And I took their friends out, and they said, Mike, I'm surprised you fish so shallow and so fast. And that was an eye-breaking thing for them as well. It's just, and every bait has something that makes it trick, makes it work extremely well compared to the others. I just don't make a bait to sell. I make a bait that catches fish. And that's what I focus on more than anything. My mail call is 2 big toads versus something I got in the mail. I think of things a little bit differently than a lot of other people, but that's how I got started, and that's basically what I do for a living. And I've had a blast these past 16 years. I mean, that's just has been awesome. It's been very, very challenging, and I had a lot of mentors along the way. Gary Dobyns being one, Dave Burkhart with Trickfish, teaching me the behind the scenes stuff of the industry, going to ICAST, meeting people, how to market. It's a whole different thing of making a swim bait and making thousands of them. And then you got to sell the thousands of them, and get that thing out there. So it hasn't been a one-man show, but I've had a lot of mentors along the way that have really been helped me. And it's good that I had a background in restaurant management, being able to manage a business and from a profit standpoint, and being able to secure deals and marketing and hiring and all that kind of stuff. So it was a sum of the parts of everything that made it work. So sure. That's how I got started.
Nice. Justin Field Fan says, did you attend the Bass Fishing Homepage breakfast in Nashville?
Yeah, I remember the gatherings we had back in Nashville. We also had the rallies in Texas. I used to live in Dallas, Fort Worth there for a couple of years. I went to the first rally there. We did one on Gunnersville. We did one on Pickwick. I've had a lot of friends back there from the Bass Fishing Homepage. Unfortunately, some of them have passed on, and that was a very pivotal part of my fishing career, is being able to get on some of the first forums out there. I really miss that. Then the internet, Facebook came on, and I think everybody got away with that a little bit. But those are some of the good times of my life was being able on the Bass Fishing Homepage and Gary's page, and we cut up bad over there sometimes, but it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
Nice. So what was the first bait? Like what sink, what size? It was the Bull Shad, right? Like what size did you start with? And now there's a fast sink and a slow sink and a floating, and like what was kind of the first bait to market that you really like?
It was the Bull Shad. It was the very first one. We're very lucky that our first bait was a hit. A lot of people go years and years and years without getting a hit. And it was very fortunate that was it. And I think we started off with like the 6 or the 7 inch. Um, and then after we did the 6 or 7, we had the 8 and the 9, because I know I've been thought the 9 is one of my favorites. And then after that, we did a reveal with Gene Jensen when we brought out the Bull Gill. Um, yeah, we started off with multi segments. Pretty much, we did a bunch of different sizes, and we did some different rates of falls, like you mentioned, and then we did the bluegill, and then from there it was wake baits and 4x4s, and then we get into the god bait market, and which is where we're at now. So,
but it was really the Bull Shad, and that's that original, like, I mean, this is I guess I have a 5-inch, which is actually probably one of your later ones. You actually started at 6 or 7 and went up before you probably came back to a 5-inch, right? Like, but this is what the 5-inch looks like. And at the time, from what I remember, because I mean, this is what 15 plus years ago, right? When you really kind of started churning these out. At that time, definitely the most realistic shad bait out there, probably. And it's kind of stood the test of time. It's, if you're talking about a showroom pretty, it's not right, the prettiest, fanciest bait out there in the world, but also that, not every shad is perfect in its environment either, right? So I don't, and I think you also fish these baits pretty fast and you're looking for reaction. So, but it's a proven winner for sure. And that's kind of the 5-inch. I kind of grabbed this one because as a tournament angler, I got this like mental block of throwing like 7, 8, 9-inch baits to some degree. But yeah, so cool. Yeah, I guess how many years did you kind of just focus on the bull shad before you really like got into the bull gill and some of that other stuff?
I think we didn't ring the bull gill out until I actually got a shop. So I think we were in business for 7 years before we brought into the bull gill and stuff. So yeah, it's interesting. People think I was a instant overnight success. And that certainly was not the case. And an interesting story that I was told is the Cinco, which is the most iconic bait out there. It took 7 years for the Cinco to become popular. I thought that was extremely interesting. And that was the same case for us. I was a one-man show for 6 or 7 years. My first employee had 9 hours a week, just to give you an idea. And he was at 9 hours a week for a while. He was in school in high school, so he really couldn't work a whole bunch. But it was perfect for me because that's all I really needed. But it took me a long time to, because I was one of the first. I was the first guy out here in the east, east of the Mississippi anyway, to build baits and go full time. And so it was definitely some challenging, especially the price point differences and stuff, where people were used to paying $8-9. $14.99 for a Lucky Craft was expensive back then. That was the number one bait that was, price point wise. So it took a lot, but it's kind of like customs. You have custom rods, you have custom cars, you have custom pool cues, you have custom golf clubs and stuff. And this is just a spring off of that. When you have fishing lures, sometimes it's something different, something custom is what gets those fish to react. It's something that they haven't seen before. But it has definitely been a challenging 16 years that we've been doing this, and it's still challenging, more challenging now than ever. Now that you've got a bunch of other builders in there coming in, it makes you have to be on your toes a little bit, more so than you did back when I started. So.
Yeah. So a lot of your like OG baits, right? Like your bull shads, your bull gills, some of those baits are kind of available at a lot of your partners, right? You kind of have like a couple divisions of your baits, right? You've kind of got your ones that are, I don't know, like I said, 15 years ago, $50 was like, people are like, you're crazy, right? And now it's like, that's kind of an, I don't know, an entry level swim bait, at least for like the you know, the 6 inch
Right.
plus type swim baits. It's actually pretty affordable in the grand scheme of things. Um,
Exactly right.
and right. And so these are the ones, you know, kind of your, I don't know, call it your $50 to $60 baits are the ones that are kind of available at the Omnias, the tackle warehouses, you know, probably 100 other of your kind of small shops that you work with. The burritos, you know, that's one of your soft baits. Um,
Yeah.
and then you've kind of got, right, your more, I guess what we call those your customs. Now that you kind of got into the glides and some of that stuff, right? Those you just sell through shows, drops on your site, things like that.
Right. Yeah. Um, the glide part is extremely challenging for us and for a lot of vendors. Um, the issue with glides and retailers is number one, we've already got 60, 70 SKUs. You know, you see all those SKUs up there. We have to keep
Yep.
up with those. You know, we have 125 shops, um, and we still have to produce all of those bases you see on the website there. And we have like 125 of them. So guides are extremely popular right now. If I were to open up the guide market to retailers, holy hell, I would have to triple my staff. You know, we pick it the guides, you know, on the side to, you know, just to be able to keep up with things because we also got burritos and it comes in 40, 30, 40 different colors. And the Bull Shad's coming, you know, 3 different colors, 3 different rates of fall, and they come in size 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 7 sizes. Bullgills come in 3 sizes, rats come in 1 size, come in 3 colors. So you can see how these SKUs start to get complicated. Um, a lot of people might say, well, KGB does it or any of these other companies do it. They've only got 3 SKUs. You know, we've got 60, 70, 80 of them. So it's a whole bunch different ball game when it comes to glide bait, and they're also more technical to make. You know, I know it's only 2 pieces, but a bull shad is a whole bunch easier to make than a glide bait because you know the sink rate is really not as important, as crucial, I should say, as a glide bait. And you to get these things to sink super slow, you have to actually weight tune every single one of them, and then you have to test swim every single one of them as well. And they're very tasking to make as far as the formulas and stuff. What happens is the humidity in here in the south really wreaks havoc on your rate of falls for your baits. And if you have a glide bait that sinks like a rock, it's not going to glide very well because it's got some downward pressure. It's going to go down like this, and your sweeps are not going to be as nice, and they're not going to be as fluid as enough. So it's very technical, even though it looks like it's easy. It's not. You also have to make the tail. The tail sometimes takes several hours to make, um, but because of the curing process. So there's a lot of moving parts with the glide bait, and our situation is kind of unique because we have so many different schemes and so many different retailers that we can't focus in on one. So if I stopped everything and just did glide baits, I could probably do it. But I'm not going to give up my what it's kind of like leaving fish to go to find more fish, that kind of thing. You know, you don't want to stop what's working for you, but you want to try to fit them in. But having said that, we are working on something that's going to be coming out more than likely soon that might help everybody with uh, the glide bait fetus from Bull Shad. So we're working on a little something there for the retailers, especially the retailers, that will I think you'll like. That's what I'll say is that much.
Is that is that the one you did the swim video on that you showed the swim video, or is that something different?
What,
I don't know. You
oh no,
like
this is different. 100% different. Nobody's seen it.
okay. So what were you doing in the? I don't know. Is that out yet? Whatever you were talking about in that the one you were showing the swim test on.
something.
I don't know. Like last week, you threw something in the pool and said, "Guys, it's coming. If you know, you know," or something like that.
That was a 6-inch trick shot. That was the one that we did. The resin 6-inch trick shot that we did. That was what that was, which we just released for the shop only for now. There you go. We will sit. It just shot. It's coming, Walton. It's coming. We did that as a way to create excitement for the new shop, the storefront opening back up. Eventually, we will do some drops on the 6, but we just wanted to get that out there and create some excitement. It's a sweet looking, it's a sweet swimming bait. I mean, I've actually did that bait first before I did a 7 or the 9 or the 11. And that was the very first one I did. And I don't remember why I just came out with the 7, but it was just we wanted to do something in the middle. That way we could do smaller, we can do bigger instead of just start from the bottom and work your way up. But yeah, it's common. That's common, Walton. I promise.
Yeah, that's the 7-inch trick shad, which came out at
right there. Yeah.
Which came out. Well, I don't know if it came out at Knoxville but that show season, right? The 2023 show season is when the 7-inch trick shad came out, right?
Yeah, that's a 7-inch. That's correct.
Right. Yeah. So I bought this at Knoxville, and then I gave one to Brendan or sold, or I guess I didn't flip it. I sold it to him for what I paid for, because he couldn't make the classic. So I grabbed one for each of us. But I have caught a few bass on this. It's a fun bait to fish. But the 6-inch, which Walton is asking about, is out, but it's only, I guess, short term, only available at the physical store in Georgia. That's what you're saying, the Bull Shop, right?
Right. It's coming. It's coming. Everything we make, we will get out there in the masses sooner or later. It's just, we don't make baits just for certain reasons, but we have so many different baits. And I mean, we just say this: we make different baits to stay relevant, to stay on top of the trends, to stay on top of the industry, to stay on top of innovation. But what our problem is, like I said, we have 60, 80 different SKUs. Resin baits are not made to be mass produced. It is extremely difficult to make 1,000 baits. Extremely difficult. And then you have to sell 1,000 baits. It's really, really difficult. But we keep making more baits so that we can stay relevant and stay on top of things. But meanwhile, we don't want to give up what we've already created. As far as the $50, $60. I don't want to alienate any customers from a price point. If you notice, and you said earlier, 50, 60 is actually very affordable, and that's for a reason. I want to keep those baits as affordable as I can. Unfortunately, the economy is making it super, super difficult to do that, because prices, ever since COVID, prices have been scooching up, and I've kept the prices where they are, other than a couple of dollars or two, to stay in that price point to make it worth our while and keep it. But we don't want to alienate those customers, because what's happening is you're starting to get a lot of commercial companies, I call them ABS baits, and a lot of people think us custom builders don't like the ABS guys. That's furthest from the truth as far as I'm concerned, because those companies, the Spros, the Texacos, and the Savage Gear, and whoever else makes baits or swim baits, it gets those people started. It's the gateway drug to what we do, because it gets them started.
The marijuana of the swim baits
at an affordable price. They get some success on it. Say, I wonder what one of these custom ones will do. So they gravitate from the $14.99 to the $49.99. Without us, you're going from $14.99 to $120, because that's where a lot of people start off at in the resin industry. So we're kind of in the middle there. If you want to get there, most people, it's a lot easier to jump from going from $14.99 to $50 to $60 than going from $14.99 to $120 or $180 or whatever. Because you start getting the glide baits, you could get up in the 200s quick. And that's been very important for us, is to make sure that we stay there at the working man or more working man type price. Um, and that's been a lot of our recipe for success is getting that in there. And it's hard. It's hard to keep up with production, and not raise prices. And I don't want to. A lot of people say, Mike, we got another price increase here. And I'm like, I want to keep it where it's at because I want to make sure that, that they consider us as an option, when they come from the ABS baits and join into the custom side of things. So, but that's been very important for us.
Yeah. And I guess, and you also are in the ABS space as well with your collaborations, right? So I guess we could talk about that a little bit, right? So you started with, at one time Ketchco, right, with the baby Bull Shad, which is was it a 4-inch swim bait, right?
3.75.
3.75. And then the Bull Gill came out a year or two later, which is just a slightly different profile. But I guess this is right. So you kind of offer something everywhere from basically $15 to $200, and levels of detail and customization everywhere along the lines. And I think we mentioned them earlier, the like a Spro and the Chad Shad, right? They got a lot of buzz for a collaboration that was done well, which it was, right? I think most people are I think very positive of that Spro and they did that correctly. They didn't rip them off. They worked with them. It was a joint development. I think everybody won in that situation. But you actually did that before them with this bait, right? So so this, and these have, if you've been in a Dick's Sporting Goods or, you can find these in a ton of places. But I guess the new news is, right, I think kind of bringing full story here is now no longer are the ABS baits with Ketchco, but they're with GSM Outdoors.
Correct. Right. We did a bunch of baits with Ketchco, and we were one of the first builders, to collab with commercial and bring our designs mainstream to the commercial market. And Ketchco got in a little bit of trouble. Well, they got in a lot of trouble financially, and they didn't survive the post-COVID ordeal. And I can give you a small brief synopsis on basically what happens is when COVID hit, what happened was everybody basically had the social distance. They basically said, hey, you work from home. You can't go work. You go outdoors. So what everybody did is they went fishing. And when everybody went fishing, I think fishing licenses increased by several $1 million or several million different anglers. And the fishing industry got a bum rush of new people in the industry, and they bought everything off the shelves. If you remember, Walmart, the pegboards was empty. Dick's and all those guys who had empty peg. That's because everybody bought everything, and they couldn't restock it fast enough. So COVID hit, and sales went up. Well, what happened was China, where COVID started, they had to shut down. That's where all these baits made in this commercial industry were made overseas. So what happened was okay, the big companies here said, hey, I need to place an order. Well, we're sick. We can't make baits. We have to social distance too. And the factory shut down. People died. They had to replace people. It was a big cluster, there for a while. So finally, when China got back online to make baits, everybody in the bunnies wanted to order, because they had shelves empty, peg hook empty. Their Waco boxes in the store and the warehouses were empty. So it's going to take us 14 months to get you your order. So can you imagine being a commercial company here in the States, say, I have to order a year and 2 months in advance? And
and then get it right and accurate. Right?
That is a daunting task. I could barely do 2 months, much less 14, 14 months. So what happened is they placed these massive orders. I mean, semi-loads of baits that they've ordered in China. They made them. Well, guess what happens after 14 months? COVID passed. Everybody's back at work. So now they get these massive truckloads of baits in. All these companies, I mean, every big name company in the United States now has tons of product. But everybody's back at work. Those people that bought all those licenses are now back at work. People were tired of fishing. They went back to hunting or whatever. So now they're sitting on all this stuff to get rid of. And all at the same time, which is what really hurt. And so, you got to be able to liquidate those stuff to be able to pay your people. So they started laying people off, and that's just not restricted to Catchco. That's to every big company out there. Every single one of them struggled hard, and unfortunately, some of them didn't make it. Catchco was one of those. But anyway, so the deal when that came out, they had to liquidate. A company named Gordon Brothers bought them out, and they came up to me, Mike, and said, Gordon Brothers is going to keep what is the most profitable and get rid of what didn't work. And the reason that they came to us, to Catchco, to begin with, is because they were having a hard time getting products for their boxes, the mystery box. That was the most profitable thing for them. And, and that was what we were part of. And also they were doing retail stuff. So they said, Mike, we want to give you the opportunity to find somebody to take over this project for you. And we will work with them and sell it to them at a very good cost. And I said, they could have easily gone to Ollie's. They could have gone to any kind of liquidator, and you would have seen them for $3.99 or whatever. And it would have been done and over with. But they were very nice to come to me and said, Mike, you find your suitor. So I went out and I emailed whoever I knew in the industry that I thought would be a good fit. And I emailed Crispin Powell at GSM. I said, here's my situation, and this is something that you want to do. He said, absolutely. So we met. Crispin lives in West Tennessee, and I live in Georgia. So we met around Nashville, and we had breakfast, and we talked, and and we found it was a good fit. Crispin, our GSM gets a lot of shit for buying a lot of different companies, but you have to understand that the guy that runs this company was a product development guy for Strike King for 17 years. He's a fisherman just like us. He's a tournament guy. He's not a coat tie, a necktie sitting at a desk, and we don't need to do this, we don't need to do that. He has a test tank in his garage. He does what I've done for the past 16 years at a much higher level than I have. And he has the connections for retailers and stuff. And, they bought Bill Lewis, Big Bite Baits, and those are big companies, So we got it off really well, and we made it happen. And so a lot of people are confused that I sold to GSM. That is not true. I still do my resin baits. Nothing has changed with us. We still have our shop in Acworth, Georgia. They are not in control of anything that I do in my shop. Nothing has changed. What I have done is I have sold them the rights to my name to create a line of ABS baits, just like I did with Catchco. They've also took over they bought all the inventory from Gordon Brothers, Catchco, all the baby bull gills, all the baby bull shads, all that stuff is now in their warehouse. And now they are in charge of distributing that product. So, and I will be creating a line of baits for them. And that's something that we've been working on for the past couple of months, ever since the transition happened. So, so that is basically the situation that we're doing. We just do ABS baits for them, for GSM, and then Bull Shad still does our resin baits. They will be at a much cheaper price point, of course, with ABS baits, and we will be the higher end version, I guess, the resin baits for Bull Shad. So that is the gist of the two companies and how that works.
So the I was gonna say the licensed Bucca brand baits, the injection molded baits, they are designed by you
Right.
though.
Yeah, that's correct.
So
They
it's
named it the Bucca
still
brand
your design. It's
to
still
keep it
yep,
separate. Correct.
yep.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah. I mean, they just wanted to make sure that there was not any confusion of, you have to have two separate entities. So if you just call the ABS under Bull Shad, well, that's confusing. That makes it make like I make it and then I don't make it. So Bucca brand is GSM, Bull Shad is what we've always been doing and we will continue to do for the foreseeable future, as far as I'm concerned.
Kind of think of it as like your signature series injected baits. I mean, that's kind of a
Right.
way to think of it, right? Like just like a pro puts their name on a signature series, they develop a line of rods.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like the Bucca series swimbait rods, you don't make those swimbait rods, but you were part of the design and development. But
Right.
those are owned and operated by Gary Dobyns. Well, now GSM, but at the time when they were developed, right, it's kind of actually a very similar situation. So
yeah, correct. And like I was saying, I wanted to. It's important to me to stick around the grassroots of fishing. And what was happening is people were going to the Catchco baits and the Bull Shad stuff, and then they were coming from there, and they were coming to me, and then I was passing them off to the higher end guys. So now I have them at the front end, I have them in the middle, $14.99, $15.99. Then we do the $50, $60, and then we have our high end baits as well. So we have all different tiers of price points, kind of like cars do. I don't know my cars very well, but they got cheaper cars, and then they have middle of the road, and then they have high end stuff. But hey, Jim. But that's basically what we're doing is carrying them over from the very beginning to the very end.
cool. Yeah. Actually, let's take a quick 60-second break, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about your relationship with Gary. How's that sound?
Oh my God, I hate that little sucker. But anyway, Gary has been a friend.
Just wait. We're gonna come back in 60 seconds to talk about Gary and that whole relationship.
Are you ready to reel in your next home purchase or refinance? Supreme Lending's Dream Team can help guide you through the entire mortgage process, from pre-qualification to closing. We have a wide variety of home loan programs in our tackle box, including down payment assistance and first-time homebuyer options. You can ask HellaBass. He trusted us to help finance his home. Contact the Dream Team today by searching Supreme Lending Dream Team, or click the link below in the description, or scan the QR code on your screen.
All right, we're back. Thanks to the Dream Team. When you gotta build out that new shop with all this stuff, maybe the Dream Team will be able to help you out. Or when somebody wins a couple $100,000 on a tournament on a Bull Shad, then they can help you out on their your new dream home. So, but yes. So, how long have you known Gary? I guess if you want to call him a friend. And how did you get to know Gary, and how did that relation start, and when did it start?
Gary, gosh, I met Gary back at ICAST when it was in Vegas. This was prior to Powell Rods, when he was with Powell, and he will fire me if I said Powell at the P word. But anyway, I was Gary's first staffer when he went with Powell, and I was one of the very few that he brought from Powell to Dobyns. But Gary has always been a mentor for me. If you guys remember the Bossa Bull that I did, he was instrumental in getting me and helping me with that, finding me somebody to make those type of baits. And he had actually the perfect person that actually did the baits. It was called the Bossa Pro, and it was discontinued. And he actually found me the manufacturer that made it. And so he was instrumental in that project for me. And the one thing you got to respect about Gary is he will tell you the absolute God honest truth, whether you wanted to hear it or not. And that's what I like about Gary, is he won't sugarcoat anything. He's got a colorful vocabulary, and but I've known him for many years, and he's been one of my mentors in the fishing industry for as long as I've known. And the guy's won 40 something boats. Can you imagine winning 40 something boats? And he did it at the local level too, which is very difficult. And it's an amazing human being, and I've always had a lot of respect for him. I could text him at any time of the day, and he'll answer me right back. But I love that guy to death. I hate that he sold his company to GSM, but I understand it. I mean, he's worked hard for that place, and he's in the 60s now. He's an old fat sucker, and he's on his tractor and he's playing with his farm and building ponds out there in Texas. So I respect the hell out of that. And I know that was not an easy decision for him, but he's not gone from the company. He's still very much in charge of development of the new rods and stuff. So he's not totally checked out or anything, but he's been a good friend for years. I mean, I think we've been friends for 20 years or so. Nice. I still haven't got to fish with him yet, but one day I hope I can do that. So he's a good guy, one of the good guys in the industry.
And Gary's a fan favorite. He's been on here several times. He's always one of the most popular guests we've had on. So good reminder from Ryan. Yeah, hit the like button, get a few more eyeballs on to hear Mike talk about swim baits. I guess since we're talking about that, how long ago did you come out with the Bull Shad rods with Dobyns? When did those start?
I think that was 3 years ago we did that, and Gary and I have been talking for years. We need to do something. And I said, here I have an idea, and I wanted a rod for a lot of people where, you buy 3 or 4 different rods to cover a technique. I said, I want to try to make a rod that can do a lot of different things, and, a one-stop shop type rod. And that's where we came up with the 836, 2 to 8 ounces. And he said it's one of the best selling swim bait rods he has. So it was so well that he said, Mike, let's do another one. So we did the 835, and that came out a year ago, I believe. It's the 1 to 5 ounce. So thank you, Sean. A lot of people ask me, says, well, when do you use one over the other? And that's a very good question. There are some overlaps, as you can see in the lure weights. But usually what I like to do is 1 to 3.5 or so ounces, I'll use the 835. And anything over 3.5, I'll probably use the 836. And the only reason this difference is the 835 weighs a little less than the 836. That's the only reason I would choose one over the other. You just be a little more comfortable. The 836 has up to 8 ounces, so it's a big, stout, stiffer rod than the 835. But the weight difference is really the only reason. But if you need one rod to cover a lot of your bases, the 836 is what I would go with. And but thank you, Jim. But they've done very well for us, and hopefully we could do another rod. I have another idea. I approached Gary with it, and he thought it was too niche at the time, and I said, well, we might be getting into that category pretty soon, so he may be forced to do one if GSM makes him do it. Yeah, I mean, it's been a really good thing. They work extremely well. They hold up good. The action is superb. It is not a build on or add on to what they already sell. It's a completely different blank than the 795, 796, 806. A completely different blank. So we started from completely from ground level versus cutting something off here of this rod. But me too, and I would really love to see longer swim bait rods. And it's funny you asked that question, is how did we come up with the 8'3"? I said, Gary, what's the longest you can make it without taking it in the rear when you ship it. And that's the
Right.
biggest problem is the rods, is the shipping part. He can make them 10 foot, but shipping them, when they came out with those balloon payments for shipping, when you do a rod, that changed the entire industry. You won't see many other big long rods unless it's probably two pieces, because it's not advantageous profit wise to ship these things, because you're looking at $100 plus to ship a rod that I think is over 8'4". But Gary had a deal with his local post office that 8'3" was the biggest that he could ship without, getting into that balloon payment. So, and that's not for Dobyns. That should be for everybody. I don't think Tackle Warehouse even carries the 836 at their warehouse. They have Gary drop ship it, if is my understanding. So, and that's the problem with the swim baits, the swim bait rods. Is I love longer rods. I would love to have an 8 foot, 9 foot, 836, or what is it, a 906 or whatever. I don't know how the terminology is, but I would love a longer rod for the swim baits that we already have. But yeah, it's just the shipping part that keeps the rod builders from making them a lot longer. So, but there is a trend there for a lot of people wanting some shorter rods, and they want some longer handles and stuff. So I think Gary's working on something there for swim bait guys that want some longer handles. And I think it's cork as well. So they'll be more expensive, but that is the trends as far as the swim bait rods are concerned, and that's why they have the lengths that they have. The 908 that came out was well before the shipping balloon and stuff that the post office charges now. But Gary still makes that rod, but I doubt he'll make anything over that unless it's a two-piece thing. And I know he doesn't like making two-piece rods.
Yeah, actually, we actually talked to Gary about this in the last interview, and I think Gary has no problem with the two-piece rods. It's the concern about the customer acceptance and the perception of the two-piece rods. So they do it in the Japanese market, and so there is some talk about it. It could happen, but got to tread lightly. Can't just go all in on that. You got to crawl before you walk, before you run on that.
Exactly. As I was one of the guys that got him to do the travel rod. He kicked and screamed on that idea for a long time. I said, dude, when you go to Mexico, it costs $100-$200 to get the damn rod onto the airplane, and people wanted to try to get a travel rod where you can put it, you can just check it in as luggage and not have that big balloon payment. Because when you go to, you want to be able to bring your own rods or fish with a Dobyns and an outfitter that doesn't have a Dobyns rod, you can bring those in. So, and that's one of the reasons why he did that. And it was a test run, to see how it does. But that's one of the reasons why he did that, is because those of us that like to travel to go to Mexico or go Colombia fishing for peacocks or anywhere overseas, or even not even here in the U.S., you need to, bringing a rod on an airplane is a cluster. 8-foot tube, and it's this big around, and you got to have a shoulder strap, and you can't get through anything with it. But that is the whole deal between the travel rod there, and I hope it does well for him. I hope it, he continues to make different models and stuff for us, those of us that like to travel a lot and go fishing in other areas. So,
absolutely, yeah. So it kind of sounds like, right, like, if I had to guess, like the 7-inch bait is kind of the swing bait. You can go either way, 835 or 836. But once you go above this, you're probably definitely 836. But
exactly right.
This kind of this one you could do with either rod, right? So I kind of think that if people are kind of wondering, I think there was a good question about. Let's see here. So A-Red says, is it possible to make a swim bait or a glide bait that can be thrown on a non-specific swim bait rod, something you can pitch into tight areas? And I think the 6-inch trick glide, the 5-inch Bull Shad, anything that's 6 inches and under, I think you can throw on a jig rod, a Carolina rig rod, things like that. Don't you? What do you think, Mike? I mean, it's not ideal, but like if you want to get into it, not invest in a swim bait rod. I've had pretty good luck throwing 5 and 6 inch baits on like a 764 Champion and things like that with like 20-pound big game and things like that. I mean, I've got 795s and things like that, but sometimes I don't always have them in the boat and things like that. So I don't know. Some of the smaller swim baits I actually do think you can throw on traditional tackle.
Yeah. This is touching base on what I mentioned earlier. There's some niche techniques out there that don't have any rods built for them. The problem is it's niche, it's small. I do pitch some swim baits in places. I'm also in the category that I like to make longer casts and keep my distance away, especially with bigger fish and my clear waters that I have. So I try to make longer casts and not shorter. But there are some instances where you do need to pitch and stuff, especially in the tight quarters and stuff. But you're starting to get into the category of yeah, that's a need for the rod, but maybe not for that many people. So it's a risk on the manufacturer's end. Is it worth his while because he has to buy 500 or 1,000 of one rod, and if they don't sell, you get stuck with 500 to 1,000 rods. So that is the thing. The issue between the disconnect between the swim bait guys and some of the rod manufacturers is, it needs to be on a smaller scale to see how it works. Like I said earlier, there's a rod out there that we don't have that needs to be done, and that's for the smaller guides. And what I found out from peacock bass fishing just last week, when I was in Florida, is those peas, they wanted that damn bait a certain way. I was using a 764, which is a 765, which is a flipping rod. It's a lightweight flipping rod, but they wanted that sucker, jerking like a jerk bait as fast as you could. And if you didn't do that, you didn't get hit. And that was very cumbersome to your hands and stuff to be able to do that, because the rod is a little heavier. It's not a jerk bait rod, but you don't want a flipping stick either. You want a swim bait is nothing more than an oversized crankbait because it's got treble hooks on it. So you need that parabolic bend. Can you catch a swim bait fish on a flipping stick? Absolutely. You can catch anything on a telephone pole if you hook them good. It's those skin hook fish and those peas. They're snipping at it, or the spots, or the smallmouth, or the smaller mouths and stuff. It's harder for them to get the hooks a little bit. And then their very aggressive nature of how they wanted that bait presented was problematic in getting that to work. So you had to really whip that rod tip a good bit to get that thing to sit there and do this really, really quick to get them triggered into it. The peas were on the bed and they blow at it. You can see there. My son, he had a little bit of live bait in the boat, and they were even blowing the live bait out. They weren't hitting it, but they were just blowing it. You can see they just shoot a bunch of water out, and the bait does this when they did it. So it was very interesting to see that, and I've had that happen with spotted bass a lot. But that, I got a little off topic, but there's a lot of rods out there that are needed, but they're probably too niche to be able to do. And that's the disconnect that there is between some of the rod manufacturers and the swim bait guys. And that's techniques as well.
And that's why we have custom rod builders out there, right? So like if you need something, you can have somebody build it. So
exactly right. Yeah. And finding that blank though, that's got to be problematic in itself, because I'm sitting here going through Gary's lineup. Meet with Bryce, and we're like, will this work? Will this work? Will this work? And there's some that are, you got to be able to throw a 1.5 ounce bait or 2 ounce bait, and also be able to be light enough to work it like a jerk bait. So basically, you need a 2 ounce jerk bait rod that's light enough for you to sit there and do this with. So that's difficult. That's a tough one.
All right, we got a couple specific. Where would that question go here? So. Lightning N says, how does the 4x4 and the knocker compare to the bull wake?
That was a very common question. I actually did a video. If you go to our YouTube page, it's got a video on there. I go into extreme detail on our YouTube page. But the 4x4 is a crank down. The wake is a wake. They are identical as far as from the side view that you have there. Absolutely identical. They're made in the same exact mold, in fact. What differences is we use a different resin for the wake bait than we do the 4x4. We want it to float more. You want that wake to stay up on top. So, and then we change the bill for the wake just to keep the physical differences. So if you show me a bait from the side, I can't tell you what it is. But if you show me a bait head on, look at the bill, I can tell the difference. So I wanted to, and in the 4x4, we add more weight, and we add more weight to it so that it will dive deeper. You know, it's a 4x4 is a horrible weight bait. Some places, some baits, you can get, some 4x4s, you can get them to wake, but they want to dive because the resin has less balloons in it than the wake bait does. So we want the wake bait to stay up, and we want the 4x4 to float, but we want it to go down. So that's what the differences are between the two. Both are phenomenal baits for what they do. And a 4x4 has been an iconic bait for us. It's one of the very first. When I used to be a big square bill guy, and back before my swim bait days, and being able to bounce some things off cover and stuff. That's why I built that bait, is so that it can go off cover. But the weight bait is more floating, and the 4x4 is for cranking. But I made the 4x4 for the simple reason that I had some places where my fish were following me and seeing the boat and spooking. So what I would do is I'm fishing a laydown, and I would stay far back as I could, and I needed to get into the trees and have something to go through it. And if I got through it with a glide bait or something, they would follow me a good bit. And this happens a lot in very pressured lakes. If you keep fishing a laydown the same, everybody fishes it the same. You throw to the left side, you throw to the right side, then you throw in front of it. Those fish get conditioned to those types of things, you know, on your boat position. And if you were to ask me what I learned the most about swim bait fishing that wasn't as obvious, and boat position is the number one thing that that jumps out to me, is being able to present a lure in a way that is not what everybody else does. So what I did is I parked my boat 50 yards down from the laydown, and I take a machete and I bushwhack myself a trail to the head of the laydown. So now I'm fishing from shore on a bass boat lake, 13,000 acres, and I'm throwing out in front of the laydown out, and I'm bringing it to shore. And I don't want to get hung up. So that's where the 4x4 came in, is it goes over those limbs. If you've seen the video that we had, it jumps up over those limbs really easy. And that is what I built that bait for. And it just happens to work very good the other way too. But, it's amazing the amount of fish that you get, especially bigger fish, that lose their mind when they see something coming from a different angle that's not normal. I could give you a million stories on where that has been crucial. We have a community hole on Altoona, and it's Park Marine right out there in front of the dam. And what it's got is it's over 140 feet of water, and it's got a row of floating wave barriers. They're what, 5 foot wide and 8 foot long, and they string them along in front of the marinas to keep the waves from getting to the boats. Well, we would go inside the marina and fish those wave barriers. Those fish were schooling and busting, and they were hanging up under the thread fin, were hanging up under the wave barriers. And it's one of the biggest community holes there is. And it's funny, you go throw at the wave barrier and ring it, you follow. There's a follower. You get 15, 20 followers. They wouldn't hit it. So I said, let's try something. Let's go on the other side of the wave barriers, throw over the wave barriers and bring them to the wave barriers, one right after the other. And all I did was change my boat position. to just to get the stupid things like that really triggers the fish. And again, you have to, you hook them, you bring them over the wire barriers and get them in the boat. But it was that instance to where I said, damn, boat position is number one. I always try to think of some ways that I could present my bait differently than what everybody else does. And my rule of thumb is usually if it's a pain in the ass to set up on a particular spot or whatever, it's probably the right way to do it, because not everybody else is going to put in that effort to get that different angle on the fish than what you would normally do. So that's why uphill works a lot very well versus the other way, is because a lot of people don't fish uphill very much. You cast it ashore and you bring it in. That's what 99% of the people do. Not many people cast out deep and bring it shallow, as many, I should say. So
yeah. So I think there's two things, right? You're showing the fish something different, and you're creating a pinch point where they can feel like they can trap it.
Exactly. It's kind of like glide baits, and you're pinching them up on the surface. They could trap that bait up on the surface. They could trap it at a pinch point. This is exactly what I'm saying. 100%.
A couple people have asked, what is Mike's favorite bait to throw that he makes?
Oh boy. I will answer that this way. Keep in mind that I'm what I consider a trophy guy. I fish for big fish. That's all I fish with. I am completely happy with not catching a fish. If I'm just going for one good fish is what I'm going for. So my favorite trophy bait is by far that I've had the most success on is my 9-inch Bull Shad. That is my number one bait. And that's from a trophy guy. If you want to catch numbers, 6-inch bone, that bait is iconic as far as that has been selling for us for 16 years now and still going strong. It's still our number one seller. Now there's some other baits that are creeping up on it, but both of those baits are proven many times over. And there's not really any competition as far as anything that's similar to it. Most people are focusing in on glide baits and stuff. And glide baits are phenomenal. Don't get me wrong. But glide baits are one of my favorite things to fish too. But yeah, the 9-inch, I like bigger baits. I don't throw a lot of smaller stuff unless I'm testing stuff. And I will also say that our 9-inch Bull Shad is one of our slowest selling baits that we make. That is 100% true. And that's one of the things I've learned in this industry. You need to make what the masses want, not necessarily what you want. I've got people say, hey, I want a 12-inch or a 13-inch Bull Shad. Well, I can make a 12 or 13-inch Bull Shad. I just ain't gonna sell a whole lot of them. People are still smaller. 6 to 7 inches, 5 to 7 inches is really where the mass majority of the people are as far as purchasing is concerned. I mean, you've got some people that buy 9, 11-inch baits. Yeah, but not in the volume that the 5s and 6s and the 7s sell. So hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it's good. So I don't know I guess this is a good question. We haven't talked much about the burrito. What is the story behind the burrito? How did that come about?
Burritos. That I talked to Gail Ratcliffe, who is the creator of the burritos. Super knowledgeable. I now that he's shown me how to make them and stuff, he's very talented at what he does. He's extremely talented, and the way he has that set up is just ingenious. It's really cool, and that's the fun part of bait making is figuring out how to make them and so that they're production easy. And he pretty much nailed it. That's pretty ingenious the way he did things. But Gail likes to design baits more than he likes to make them. I can totally get that. It gets totally repetitious and stuff. So, you know, at a time, he had some other companies that were interested in making the baits for him. And I said, Gail, I'll do it. You know, if those don't pan out, I'll do it. 100% I'll do it. You know, because his baits are awesome and they don't compete with what I already make, because they're, most of my baits, my hard baits and stuff, are upper parts of the water column. You know, 6-inch bull shad, glide baits, 4x4s, rats are all in the first 3 feet or less. These baits are for deeper stuff. So, you know, it was a good fit. You know, we wanted some stuff. Most of our baits, I guess you could say, are summer and spring, and parts of winter and fall, of course, and parts of winter. So these are good winter baits, you know, but they're also good baits year round. You can fish deeper. So when the fish are deeper, you're kind of screwed unless you find some shallow fish with the hard swim baits and stuff. So there's always some shallow fish to find. You just need to go about how to go about finding those fish. And that's one of the things that I learned. But anyway, going back to Gail, you know, we worked it out. We actually did a little skit, and that's on our YouTube page. And it was pretty funny the way we did it. He used to say out in like 30 seconds or whatever. And the video was me on his webpage trying to get on the drop. It said sold out, sold out, sold out, sold out. And Gail was in the background, and Jen was talking to him. He says, damn, I think I'm going to knock that guy off. And Gail's sitting there at the door. But anyway, he pats me on the shoulder, and I look up, and it's Gail, and it went from there. But it's pretty funny when you look at it. But we've been doing this for 3 or 4 years now, and it's been awesome. I've got one guy that does burritos. That's all he does. And there's a lot of things that we want to do with burritos that we haven't been able to do because he's so tied up with orders and stuff. But we've got a lot of things in the works with the burrito side of things. That's been more slow evolving than the Bull Shad side, because we probably need to get another guy in there to help him to be able to get to some of these other ideas. So, but that's how it started. And Gail, you know, he's been awesome to work with. We've got some other baits that he's working on that he's bringing into us. He makes the molds for us, and we pour them. And but it's been a good collaboration that we've had. It's one of the few that we've had in our industry. And but we enjoy making the burritos and the nachos and all the other stuff that we're working on.
Yeah, and being a top hook bait, I know it's like pretty popular. People going to Mexico, slow rolling them through trees and right. They're not cheap, but they're not super expensive. And with a single hook, and you can kind of get them through cover deeper, slow roll them around stumps. And you know, if you don't have front facing sonar and you can't watch your bait and make sure you're right above the brush, right, this is something you can kind of get down there and crash and have a better chance of getting it back every time. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's where it got us. It's called the Bucca Burrito, and Wayne Campbell and Chad Meenan and Brian Correa, they tested that bait on Baccarat, and that's why it's called Bucca, is because of Baccarat. But I think other than the Huddleston, I don't think there's a bait that's caught more 10-pounders than that bait has. You know, as far as trophy fish, it's been really, really productive. And not just in Mexico, here in the States as well. It's done really well. But it's a very staple bait in Baccarat area over the years. And they throw other types of soft swim baits there, and it still produces very well. It's got a unique kick to it, you know. And the one thing that I talked to Gail, and it's funny, when you make a bait, you make it for a specific purpose. And I asked Gail, I said, can we make one that we could crawl? And he said, well, that kind of takes away why the burrito works as well as it does, is because of the tail thump. And he's got a good point there, you know. And that's one of the things that people don't realize is there's triggering mechanisms in every bait. Every bait that's iconic, you know, over the years, the Cinco, the Little War, or whatever, there's something about them that makes the fish hit them. And you start twinkling with designs and stuff, you're going to lose your catching power. You know, the last thing you want to say, well, the ones that they made that Storm made many years ago were better than the ones that are made now. And, you know, that's very well true, you know. And I've had people say, well, why don't you make a prettier bush? I go, well, damn, the things work already. Who cares what they look like? They catch fish left and right. That's why I make baits, is so that they catch fish, not fishermen. Unfortunately, you have to catch fishermen in order to be successful. Um, but that's one thing you need to realize, is you don't want to get away from what has brought you this far. And you know, you know, we make an HD, but we still sell a whole bunch more of the regular ones than we do the HDs. But that's why the thing with Gail, and why he does things the way he does, and why we do things the way we do, is we want to make sure that we don't lose track of what got us to where we are, and keep us on that track.
Yeah, and you know, the crawling bait, the Huddleston is already the crawling bait, right? So no need to like, right, their tail there is designed for that slow crawl, right? So it's like, you know, kind of not every, you know, I think that's one of the things kind of like I don't love about today's tackle industry, is that everybody feels they need to have a bait in every category, and like everybody needs a spinner bait, and everybody needs a wake bait, and everybody needs a 10-foot crankbait, everybody, you know what I mean? Like, you know, do what you do and do it well, right? And excel in that. You don't need to serve everybody for every single thing. I don't know. So
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yep. But it's getting more and more. I can't imagine being in the spinner bait and the jig business. Holy hell! I mean,
yeah,
they look identical. I mean, there's just little bitty things here and there. That's a tough one. That's a tough business to be in. You know, if you're making spinner baits and jigs and shaky heads and that kind of stuff, I can't imagine the amount of competition that they have. That's kind of why I do swim baits. I try to keep something different, you know, that a lot of people don't have a lot of. And we've created our own little niche here. You know, the whole industry has. You know, we've got a lot of a black market or underground market or whatever, that we just do our own thing. You know, and we get more. It's grown more and more and more and more over the years. You know, and the universe page on Facebook has been one of our melting pot of people that come in and learn about the industry and learn about swim baits and share experiences and stuff. It's been very positive thing for the industry, going on the Swim Bait Universe page. So we have our own little gatherings and stuff. You know, how many other techniques do you have? Do you have a flipping gathering, or do you have a crank gathering? I mean, it just don't see that.
There's not many Senko gatherings or drop shot gatherings, or
so
maybe we'll have front facing sonar gatherings someday, but we'll see.
Right. I mean, you know, the gathering, if you're wondering, what we do is we go out to, the last few years, it's been in Virginia. We had one in Texas not too long ago, where a lot of the swim bait manufacturers get together, and we have booths, and the locals and the people travel for miles. Sometimes they even fly in, so to get some baits and stuff. And it's where we all mingle and get along with each other, and share what our new stuff are for the industry. It's what I call the iCast of swim baits. Yeah. It's where we release a lot of the new stuff and stuff that we were coming out with. So it's very, very cool, the way it's set up. And Wayne, Chad, and Trey Smith, and all those moderators, they provide us a place where we can share ideas and stuff. So it's been awesome.
Right on. We've definitely talked about rods, and we've talked about baits, but like, what kind of reels do you like? Let's just stick with your like 835, 836, and then what is your philosophy online? Because there's all kinds of opinions out there. There's some people that are like big mono, big fluoro, braid to leaders. Like, so I'd love to hear what, I mean, as you know, you design your baits. How do you fish them?
Good. Great question, William. Great question. I've tried.
What size reels do you like? And then go into the line, I guess. That the reel's probably the easy part.
Right. Yeah. I've tried many reels over the years. I've tried every one of them. I'm damn near every one of them. I like for swim bait fishing, I like 300 series reels for 1 to 4.5, 5 ounces. Then I like 400 series reels for bigger than that. it just feels right.
Mhm.
Do you need the line capacity to catch a bass or a striper? Absolutely not. The reason for the line capacity is if you take a 200 series reel and you throw a 2-ounce bait, you're going to throw your spool down to that. You're going to make a very long cast, 50, 60 yards, and your spool is, I'm not saying that, but it's close to that. Your retrieve speed is dramatically decreased. And as I was saying earlier, you really need that speed retrieve to get the baits. You're sitting there doing the buzzbait effect. You're trying to get that buzzbait up. And that's the same thing with a swim bait. So the bigger the spool or the wider, the more your spool is, you're able to maintain the retriever speed. That is the purpose of the line. You can fill that thing full of tape if you want, but you just need the circumference of the spool to be able to get the retrieve speed. So, I'm not going to get into the brands and stuff, but there's a lot of good ones out there. I will say that I like the 7-to-1 ratio as a good starting point for everything. It's good for glide baits. It's good for speed reeling bull shads. It's good for 4x4s. If I ever had to trickle down for my next one, it would be a 6-to-3 for weight baits or something, or for rats. But you can just reel slower with the 7-to-1 if you have to. If you have trouble reeling slower, you can go down to a 6-to-3. But almost every one of my reels, I've upgraded the bearings. I sent it to Michael Mello. I said, hey, man, I don't know what they are, but make them all 7-to-1. And he put the 7-to-1 ratio in there, and that works for me. It may not work for everybody, but I like 7-to-1 as a good, happy medium for everything. So 300 series reels from 1 to 5, 1 to 4.5, and anything bigger, you want 400 series reel. Pick a reel that you like. Tranks, Tatula, all those guys, Abu, Shimano, Calcutta's, they all work. Whatever feels good for you is good. I like my Tatulas. I really do. They just feel good in my hand. They cast good out of the box. But there's a lot of good reels out there. There's a really lot of good reels out there. But as far as line, that's where it's starting to get a little muddy. For many, many, many years, I was a mono guy, and I still can throw mono a lot. I'm not a fluorocarbon guy. I love fluorocarbon for finesse stuff. It's wonderful. For big baits, for me personally, I don't get along with fluorocarbon. I cast a lot of baits off. And I've tried the highest of end to the lowest of end, and it's still the same result as the same. I don't feel confident in throwing it there. And having said that, some of the best swim bait guys in the world use fluorocarbon. I'll readily admit that. It just doesn't work for me. It has a lot of advantages to it. You have the line stealth thing, where they can't see it. The lack of stretch, that helps too. It also that could be a problem too. So because of Jim and Kenny and those guys, I said, Mike, you need to try braid. And I struggled with braid for a long time as well. And the key with braid, if you're going to use braid, is to use 65-pound or heavier. And the reason why, and you don't need 65 pounds to pull a bass in. I'll be the first to admit that. The reason why I like that bit braid is the bigger diameter. Those that usually throw braid on 40 or 55 or 30 or whatever you throw, you'll notice that if you hook a log or whatever, and that braid, that thin diameter, digs into the spool super easy. So your next cast, you're going and you clothesline your bait, something's going to break. And a lot of times when you're throwing a big swim bait, it's the braid, and that bait goes over the horizon when you cast it off. So I like 65 to 100 if you do the 11-inch, but 80 seems to be a good medium for me. Now, people think, well, what about the visibility? There are advantages and disadvantages of every line. you know, and you have to know, and as long as you understand what the advantages and disadvantages are, you need to put that in your favor. If you're going to use mono, which is a great line, it's a foolproof line to use. The problem with mono is it stretches. So what that means to you is you need to have very good form. So when you make a cast, your rod needs to be almost facing or maybe a little bit off the bait as you're reeling it in, so that when that fish hits, you have the full hook set to get that stretch out of your line so that you can get that in there in the fish. Now you're talking about, you know, casting these things 40, 50, 60 yards on mono. That's a lot of stretch when you're making these long casts. And I'm making these long casts so I don't get spooked. They don't see me, they don't follow. So one of the best ways to get rid of followers is to make a longer cast. If you can't see them, they can't see you. That's the reason why you get a lot of followers. But if you can't hook them, that's a different story. And that's where the braid comes in. You know, as Jim alluded there, you know, you start getting into finicky fish, what they have down in headwaters. They get hammered and hammered and hammered and hammered and hammered and hammered, and they start getting line shot. That absolutely happens. Then you need to start doing fluorocarbon leaders and stuff. And that's what they're doing. It's amazing, you know, trying different things and how it affects the bites ratio. And by all means, I use straight braid for a lot of things. And I take a Sharpie and I cut a slit down the Sharpie and I black my line out. Just doesn't stick out as much as it would as the gray or frayed on it. It looks good when you first get it, but it starts to lose its color a little bit. But experiment with different things and don't be scared to try something new. I'm still a student of this game. I'm still learning. I don't know everything there is, but use common sense, experiment with different things, learn something from everybody you fish with, and be open to that, you know, be open to, you know, different strategies, you know, don't be just a glide guy, you know, be good at everything, be good at multi-setting, be good at crank dance, be good at rats, be good at glides. Glides are fun to fish, but make sure that you be a well-rounded angler. If they didn't hit glides that day, you're going to suck. You know, and so you need to be a versatile fisherman. There's pros out there that love to flip, but they know how to do something else in case they're not on a flipping bite. So, but just be mindful, be open to different things. So that's why I use the different lines and stuff. I got off topic here, but different lines know their advantages and disadvantages, and being able to capitalize on that when you're out there.
I think a couple things to add on. I totally agree. I throw mostly like big game mono on my swim baits, but back to the braid thing, like when braid kind of first came out, I tried to throw a lot of 20 and 30 pound braid on swim jigs and chatterbaits and topwaters, and I had the same problem. Like you'd catch a fish, it would dig in, your next cast, all of a sudden you're sending your vixen, you know, 400 miles into the trees when you tried to use 20 pound. Did I need 40 pound to catch that fish? No, but the 40 pound didn't dig in like the 20 pound did. So I've never been a fan of using less than like 40 pound on bait casters, even for traditional tackle. So I could definitely see with bigger baits where you got a lot more weight, a lot more propensity to dig in. And then when you cast it, you got even a bigger shock factor. So that totally makes sense to me. Same with frogs. I mean, could you cast a frog and use 20 pound braid? Sure, but 50 and 60 pound braid works way better for frogs for me. And it's not a line strength issue. It's a dig in. Yeah. And I think you have to, like, back to what are you doing, right? You told us earlier you like to throw a lot of your bull shads, 6, 7, 9, 11-inch bull shads, which you fish these baits extremely fast, right? So if you're throwing a 9-inch bull shad and you're just screaming it across the surface, I don't think that bass is going to see your 80 pound braid. Or if he's not going to worry about it, right? He's reacting to this thing, right? And a lot of times when you're throwing swim baits, depending, I mean, and it's how are you fishing it, right? If you're wide glides, right, there's a much bigger chance they're seeing or looking at your line. If you're burning or chopping a bait, much less important probably what your line looks like.
Exactly. I mean, you know, like I said earlier, you just need to experiment. You know, it's not always the bait's problem. It's the bait's fault that you're not catching fish. You know, sometimes it's you. You know, sometimes it's your line. You know, sometimes the fish are off. So don't always blame the bait, you know, for all its faults. You know, sometimes, you know, your retrieve speed is off, your cadence is off. That's what we found out about the peas. You know, the cadence was completely off. If you started doing something different, boom, I mean, it's like a light switch went off. So just be open to it, and being able to adapt and think, you know, it's rarely that you hit the nail on the head and everything just comes together, but you just got to be creative and trying to figure out, trying to trick these fish in their own environment. But exactly.
And those principles apply even if you have no intention to ever throw a 9-inch bait or a swim bait of any kind. This thought process is the same whether you're talking about square bills or jerk baits or right. I mean, like sometimes you want the dead action of mono, sometimes you want the faster action of fluoro, depending on what the fish's mood, right? Like so.
You nailed it. I mean, that's the disconnect with a lot of people is they get intimidated with the size of the bait. But you have to understand, can you picture a 10-pound largemouth moving around with the schoolers trying to catch little bitty shad? That's brutal. My ideology of big fish is they're very opportunistic feeders. I'll give you an example. I'm a big guy, 300 pounds. I'm on a couch, and you put a cracker on the counter. I'm not getting off the couch for a cracker. Not worth my time. Now, you put a T-bone on the counter, I'm going to move. I'm going to eat the T-bone. You know, and I think big fish are the same way. They would rather eat a bigger bait one time, exert the energy to eat that bait, than chase a bunch of shad around with the kids. That's just been my ideology. And from what I've learned over the past 20 years that I've been throwing them, you know, you get a lot of people talking about followers. Are there any other baits that you really see that many followers on? You know, spinner baits, chatter baits, you see them, but not as much as you do with bigger swim baits. So the drawing power of those bigger baits is magnified. That supports that theory that I just talked about the T-bone theory, is they want something that's worth their while to make the effort. They eat one time and they're done versus eating multiple meals all over the place. And that is why I think, I'm spelling golf, but that is why I think big baits work as well as they do, is because it's realistic looking, it's big enough, and it's not a lot of people throw them. They're scared to throw them. And that is why they work the way as well as they do. You just have to get it inside your head that this is what these fish feed on every day. They feed on shad, bluegill, perch, trout. Nice. They don't feed on chatterbaits every day. They hit chatterbaits. There's no trickery involved here. You know, there's no finesse worms. You know, this is what they eat every single day. The forages that we are trying to mimic, rats, you know, bull shads or glide baits, whatever. And that is what, that's why they hit it. They hit it out of imitation, like Jim says, and not food. Just something to think about, you know. It's all in your head, you know. Yeah, it's a bigger bait, but I guarantee you that if you go out with somebody that throws swim baits, you'll learn something, you know. And I always tell people this: your first few fish on a swim bait are always the hardest. They're the hardest to catch because you got that mental block in your head. But once you start catching 1, 2, 3, 4 fish, the wheels start turning, you know. I get it now. I understand it. You know, you're getting more and more effective, and then you're starting to run a pattern, and then you get very comfortable. It's kind of like bikes with a training wheel, you know. You gotta ride your bike with a training wheel and your dad holding the seat, and then once you get some experience and some success with them, training wheels come off. And then you start going bigger and bigger and bigger and see what your fish are doing. But I sell 9-inch baits, 11-inch baits, 8-inch baits, 7-inch baits all over the United States, every continent on this planet. almost, but a couple that they don't have any lakes or fish. But anyway, my point is this: is you just need to experiment, get that blinders off your out of your head, and learn to fish different things. Become versatile. It's great. You could throw a chatterbait or spinnerbait or crankbait or top water, whatever. Work your way into swim baits. There's a whole nother realm of learning when it comes to these bigger baits. You will learn more about trophy fishing, trophy bass, large bass in your pond, your lake, or your creek or river throwing swim baits than you will in half the time of just throwing the smaller stuff. So something to think about, and you just have to get it inside your head that you try something different. And you said earlier, fish it in the same exact spots you throw a chatterbait, same exact spots you would throw a crankbait or whatever. Boat docks, laydowns, grass lines, trees, rocks. If you're on a topwater bite, there's a swim bait bite somewhere. I promise you that. Fish when they're active. It's not a magic pill or anything, but it's not going to turn a light switch on a bad day. A bad day fishing, they're not going to hit much. And what a lot of people don't see is the amount of time that we put in to catch the fish that we put pictures on the internet and all that kind of stuff. We don't take pictures of sunrises very often. I can do that a lot. I can have a whole photo album of sunrises where you don't do very well. That's part of it. But you're learning more about these bigger fish. If you're a tournament guy, you need to learn swim baits. You need to be able to call, and that's a good way to do it. So just be open-minded and try different things and evolve. And another thing that I say is a lot of people say, well, that bait's not my style. Is catching fish not your style? Because you need to learn. You need to learn how to be crankbait guy. You need to learn how to be a topwater rat guy. If you sit there and you pigeonhole yourself to one bait, it may not catch a fish that day. Where if you tried a different type of guy bait or a different type of a retrieve or a different type of bait, that it'd probably do very well. So just be open-minded and learn, and just be versatile, like Tim said, and what you're doing, because it's going to help you. It's not going to hurt you. Versatility is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. Try different baits to see how they work, and hopefully it's one of mine. I appreciate everybody that supports us. So, but that's my best advice on how to fish them and where to fish them, and being successful at it. And I'm always open for PM if you guys want to talk to me or shoot the shit or whatever, where I can. Just make sure you ask specific questions. How to fish it. I mean, that's pretty broad, but tell me, if you give me situations of stuff, I can help you. So
I'm in right northeast. I'm in New York. I'm fishing a grassy largemouth lake. I'm talking about spring, right? Like give you like a little more specifics. Yeah. So Dustin always has some really interesting comments. But outside of the prison stabbing part of this, what do you like, the slow sink or the fast sink when you're talking about burning your bull shads?
Yeah. I like the slow sink a lot for burning. You can definitely do the floater. That is a hoot to fish. If I'm going to do a floater, I'll do a 5 or 6 inch floater, and that's why I only make those baits and floaters, because they're the best as far as burning and stuff. The one people that get the floaters, if I could give you some advice, make sure you have your rod tip at the water. A lot of people are trying to hold their rod tip off to the side or whatever. Those joints need to eat water. And if those joints aren't eating water, they're gonna go over on them sides. So make sure you have your rod tip at the water or under the water or whatever. It doesn't matter. But the slow sink is probably more versatile bait, because you could burn it up on top and wake it if you want, burn it fast enough, or you can let it sink a little bit and you can slow roll it. There are times where the fish, if you notice when you're fishing top water, they just swirl at it. that's one of those instances where a slow sink would probably be a little bit better bite. But I do both. But you know, if the schooling is off, it's a blast to fish those the floater baits on top. So especially the hybrids and the spots and stuff. But both work. Both work.
I guess we haven't really talked about this. Michael Kilpatrick says, "How can I buy one? They're always sold out."
Oh Lord, there's 125 retailers. Oh, probably more than that now. Probably like 160 if we just gained a bunch. You can always go to Rich's website there that he put it up there, or you can go to bullshad.com. They're available at Tackle Warehouse everywhere. You know, you can get the OG baits. Now the glide baits are a little bit harder. We do those in drops. Like I said earlier, we try to make 120, 130 baits a drop, and we put them on there. They're always a lot harder they're a little bit harder to make for us, and we do them on the side while filling the retail orders and stuff. But they're everywhere. I mean, you can go to our site right now and get them, just the OG stuff, which is what you see here on the website. You can go to Arsenal, definitely get one from them. I'd rather you support the retailers than me, if you don't mind. But both work, whatever is easiest for you.
So Omnia has got a fair selection of some of the OG stuff. You can use. I put a link in the description of this video if you're watching the replay. I can actually put it in the live chat now. You can also use my code down at the bottom of the screen. Then you can be supporting me, and you can be supporting Mike, and you can be supporting Omnia all at the same time if you want. So that's one option. And as you said, there's other retailers like Tackle Warehouse, other ones like that. You can go directly to the Bull Shad website where you got a little bigger selection. You know, he's Mike's right. If you go to Shop Lures, right, he's going to have more SKUs than any probably retailer is going to have of the OG stuff. Just because, right, not every retailer is going to carry every SKU, every size, all that kind of stuff. But the other, I guess, important thing here is if you want to get in on like the glide baits and the drops and the newer things, your best bet is to enter your emails to submit. And I've signed up. I haven't participated in a drop, but I get the emails. They come out quite regularly, and it usually tells you, I want to say, in the afternoon between like 2 and 4 o'clock Central, you're going to get an email saying 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, the 7-inch glide, the 9-inch bull, or whatever. Like this is what's dropping. So that's your best bet.
Yeah.
I think you talked about if you live in Georgia, right? There's a Bull Shad store that has some hours. And then I guess show season, right? In the spring, probably starting in like January through March, you kind of hit the road and you hit all the big shows. So that's another opportunity to get them. I guess that kind of covers the bases for the most part, right?
Yep. I mean, the email newsletter is the best way for us to communicate for everybody. People ask, well, could we put you on a waiting list? I was like, dude, I'll lose the waiting list. I mean, that's the biggest way for us to get in trouble as a builder is to get a waiting list and take money ahead of time. I would rather have the baits done, ready to go, ready to ship, and then just go and order it right then. That way we can ship it right then and there. I don't want to get in trouble, hold people's money for long periods of time, like some of the builders have done. I think pre-orders is, unless you're good, it's just people move differently when they have the money in their pocket versus having the bait shipped. So I prefer to do the email newsletter. That's why we have the baits already made, ready to ship. So as soon as you order, usually we do drops on Friday. If we do it on Friday, we ship on Monday. But the email newsletter is easiest for us to do, communicate to everybody. So if you join that, that's the best way to get the harder to get stuff. And be sure to look at the times. I'm in here in the Eastern time. I keep forgetting there's other times to the west of us. So, so make sure you look at the times. Usually if you're on there, first 10 minutes or 15 minutes, you should get a bait. But if you're late, then you'll have to wait till the next one. So once we sell out, we're done. Then we make more and drop more. So, but yeah, I mean, we're always looking for retailers. If anybody's interested in becoming a retailer, you must have a storefront. We're always looking for people to work with. get us out there some more, and we're happy to work with you as long as you got a storefront. So, but that's pretty much it. Like like you said about the newsletter. Michael, if Omnia is out of stock for slow sinking, we need to get Omnia some more baits. They need to get with us.
A couple things there. You could message Omnia, let them know you're interested. Yeah. Otherwise, you could probably also send a note to a Bull Shad either on Instagram or Facebook, or send email. They could probably tell you, hey, Carolina Fishing has some, or Tackle Warehouse has some, or they could probably point you to an online or a retailer that has an online as well that might have them.
That's the number one way you can help us. If one of your retailers is out of stock, say something to them. The more you get in there, the more the chances they'll order and restock. Like I said, I would rather you order from the retailers in your local area if you can. If they don't have it, then that's why we have a web store. We'll always have it. If we don't have it, we'll have it up there soon. But we have everything available on our website. Unfortunately, not every retailer carries every SKU that we have. So, that's why we do what we do. But usually you should be able to find somebody out there that has one on a retailer.
Yeah. It's a tricky question here, but Gators Adventures asked, what's the first bait I should buy?
Good question. I get that question a lot. Very good question. If you're new to swim baits, I would start small. 5 or 6 inch bait is where I would start. Those are our most popular sellers. You don't necessarily need swim bait equipment to throw them. You could throw it on a flipping stick to get you started. Just be mindful that that's not the ideal rod for it. Like I said, it's an oversized crankbait, so you need something that's a little bit more parabolic than a stick.
Like a 5 inch bait, you could throw on a chatterbait rod.
Yeah,
like something that's got a little, action to it.
Yeah. So 5 or 6 inch slow sink color. I'm kind of weird. I love bone. Bone has been my number one color for me personally for years. Great question on bone, but gizzard is good as well. It's more natural. I'll answer Jim Lopez. Why bone? That's a good question. For many reasons. I have a picture that I bring with me to shows that I show people. And I took this picture about 10 years ago. And basically what I did is I cast netted a bunch of fish, and there was a bunch of threadfin. I brought it up. It's the only time I've ever caught a school of threadfin. 1,000 of them in a net. And I brought them in the boat and I dropped them. I said, damn, that looks pretty close to bone from a distance, So I put a bone swim bait in that mess of shad, and I took a picture and I share that with everybody. It is amazing how well it blends in. But there's many other reasons why. What does the bottom of your topwater, your favorite topwater, what color is it? Most people say white or bone, which is basically almost the same thing, But when you're burning these things on top, that's all they see is the bottom for the most part anyway. So it probably has something to do with why a white bottom topwater works as well. And the reason I got started in bone, and I'll tell you this story, is we have a retailer in Hammonds, Jason Hammond, and he was one of our very first retailers over on Lanier. And he said, Mike, why don't you come out with a bone color? And I said, why? It's white. Nothing hits white. He says, that's the number one color that they sell on Lanier is some shade of white. So what did I do? I said, all right, I'm dumbhead. I'm dumb, but I'm not stupid. I'll pull me a bone one. Sure as hell enough, I went to the lake and I slaughtered them on that bone color. And ever since then, it's been one of my favorite colors. Bone glides, bone bull shad, bone rats, bone, you name it. Ugly color. And my late buddy Rex Chambers, what he used to do is he says, I like to dirty up your bone. He takes a barbecue brush that he cleans his barbecue and he scrapes it up and down to get it kind of dirty. And he called it dirty bone. And that is why we call it dirty bone, is because Rex frickin' took a barbecue brush to one of his baits and he brushed it, and it's not a perfect bone color, but it's more of a dirty bone. So, but it works, you know. I like it because you can see it. You can see contact, constant contact with your bait. You can see anything that's following it. It works for stripers. I caught half a dozen stripers this morning on a bone glide bait. And it's one of our #1 selling baits, you know, and it's been a hard sell for a lot of people, but once you try it, you'll like it. Clear water, muddy water, it works. Another thing for bone is, think about this. If you're fishing muddy water, what color do your fish turn? Usually when you have forage or brown or bluegill or even bass in muddy water, they come up a white color. They're not green. They have a pale hue to them. And that is another reason why I think bone works as well. And usually in muddy water, I like big bone baits so that I can get them something to see it. Plus it matches what they're already eating and stuff. So, but that's a great question. It's a very underrated color that I use. And I will always have a bone bait in my arsenal, tied on at all times, more than likely.
Yeah, you asked me what color is the bottom of my top water. It's the same color as the rest of my top water. It's all bone.
Yeah, not exactly. Bone spooks have been a staple for years. So, no, one time I used to do collaboration with custom paint on field guide service. We do those on the drops. If we do, we also have them in our storefront. So to get in on the drops, make sure that you join our email newsletter. Always let us know what you want us to offer. We have 80 different SKUs, so I mean we have a lot of different baits and stuff. So we it's hard to cater to everybody instantly. So because the baits take time to make, but we do offer, usually when we do our drops with on the email newsletter, we usually offer some kind of custom colors in there as well. They usually go very, very fast too. So, but we also offer them with our original colors or OG colors as well. So, but the email newsletter is by far the best way to get them on the online, or you can come into our storefront and you can get them that way. We don't unfortunately ship from the storefront because we would be wiped out in a day if we did that. So we're trying to keep the storefront a storefront and not an online purchase type thing. That's just something that I've done over the years, you know, because I like to keep track of what we have to make sure that we're okay for show season coming up. So because we do use those baits for shows and stuff. So, but if you visit our storefronts here in Atlanta, just north of Atlanta and Ackworth, stop by. We're right off of Highway 75. If you're ever going to Florida, or if you're ever wherever you're going, if you're ever in Atlanta on business, stop by and see us. We'd love to have you there.
Nice. Let's see here. Jim says, do we need to talk about the rat?
We need to talk about our rats. Oh, pretty. That'll hurt your eyes looking at it, won't it?
Yeah, I don't know. This one was somebody put some custom paint on this one. I picked it up, but
yeah,
so,
I like it.
Yeah, we haven't talked much about rats, but like, when do you like to throw a rat, and where did the rat come from? And
I tell you, you know, if there was one bait that surprised me the most, it would be the effectiveness of a rat. I've caught some monster fish on a rat, and it's crazy. They hit the rat in the middle of the day. They just hate the freaking rats. It's just a bait that you always have to have tie on, and it's good because you can put it in areas and keep it there and twitch it and walk it in place and not even move, or you can wake it, or you can crank it. I'm not a big cranking rat guy, but I do it occasionally, but I love waking that thing and getting that tail moving back and forth. It's really, really hard to beat a rat for topwater. Usually when I'm throwing a rat, it's usually 10 o'clock on. It's really, I don't usually fish it early. Most people realize, ask me the question, when do you catch the most biggest fish? Usually 10 o'clock on. 10 to 1 o'clock in the afternoon is when I do my best. Very seldom do I get them early. You would think it would be just the opposite. But I do best 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock on. Once that sun's up, I don't have an answer for it. But I know 90% of my trophy fish come midday or mid-morning. And it's been that way for years. And a lot of times I usually just, I sleep in and just get to the lake late and I don't miss a beat, But if any of you guys have any theories on that, I'd be open to understand it, because it never made much sense to me on why mid-afternoon or mid-morning has always been best for me.
So you you in general, right? There's always exceptions. You fish the rat a little slower than you fish your bull shads. Sounds like your bull shads, you're moving them really fast, quick. Bull shad, your rats, you're a little more erratic and intentional and methodical. Sounds like.
Yeah, I just do a straight retrieve and I twitch it. That's all I do. I don't do anything fancy about it. And I really don't even have a color preference, to be honest with you. I've done really good with all of them. White, white, pink, brown, tan, all of those. And I like, what I like to do is I like to have the pink tail. The pink tail has always been a staple for me because I like to wash the tail. That means that if you reel it too slow, the tail is not as sachet, I guess you could call it. But I like to, that's how I judge my retrieve, is when that tail is doing what it actually needs to be doing. You can see the tail, the way it swims, it looks good. That means that's the correct speed that I like to do it. The one thing I would also advise you is to experiment with the different sizes of tails. If you keep the tail the length that it is, it has more of an S shape when that tail goes through there. If you cut it shorter, it's more like a windshield wiper. Sometimes that makes a difference. I've seen that happen quite a bit of times, just experimenting with the tail. We use Danny Joe's floating worms for tails, and they're very soft. They float. They're very easy to work. They're very durable and they're easy to get. The trick worm works as well, but I've always done really good with the Danny Joe's floating worms. I know the guy that owns the company, and I've always wanted to support him. So those are really, really good tails, and you can clip them. Once the ends get torn up, just clip them and stick it back in there. But I like the retrieve rate that gives you the best tail action. That's how I judge how fast I reel the bait.
So he wants to know, do you like gravy and biscuits or biscuits and gravy more?
Can I say neither, because I'm on a diet?
What did you like back in the day? How about that?
I like biscuits and gravy. Biscuits before the gravy.
There you go. Dun, dun, dun. So I guess Brendan was on earlier. He might listen to the replay. Will the balsa bull ever come back, or is that is there ever a chance?
To be honest with you, I don't know.
Okay.
I couldn't get in contact with the manufacturer for that. He fell off the face of the earth. I was planning on making some more, and when I contacted him to reorder multiple times, no answer. I wanted to make some bigger ones, they. I don't know what happened to him. I don't think it burnt down. I just think he went out of business or something. But he's been very difficult to work. I will also say that overseas has not done wood baits as much as they have in the past. I don't know why, or access to wood or whatever. I'm not sure. But it's a little bit more harder for them to do from a production standpoint. So I don't know the answer to that question, but that's what I know. I don't know.
Sure. I just had something else going to ask. Yeah, so I guess we kind of talked about, like, there's a 6-inch glide. It's in the storefront. It's going to probably come and drop soon. You talked about there is some resin baits coming. Well, I guess you couldn't. It's going to be unique, but I guess do we know the timing on that? Is that like ICAST Classic next year, next show season? When will we be looking for these new resin baits? Or not the resin baits, the ABS baits, I think is what we were talking about.
I don't want to say. I'm not sure what
Okay.
I can say.
Not quite ready to tell. Just stay tuned.
We will have something at ICAST. I will say that. That's all I can say.
There'll be something for the Bull Shad fans at ICAST. We won't disclose who it'll be for, or what material it'll be, or what it is, but there'll be something. All right.
Yeah, be something. Yeah. Now, as far as the 6-inch resin, give us a couple of weeks. You know, we'll be making something in a couple of weeks for sure. Yeah, but yeah, it's already in motion, so we're just trying to get caught up. But it's coming. Most inspirational builder for Mr. Bucca.
This doesn't have to be swim baits. It could be.
It's actually a very easy question to answer. There's two, and those are the two who I consider the OGs of resin baits. Does anybody know who they are?
Give some people some time to guess in the chat here.
Anybody?
So somebody would be West Coast, probably. Is that fair?
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. Nailed one of them. Yep. Jerry's one. Who's the other? No.
That's too new.
He was well after Rego. Who was Jerry's partner? Most people don't know this. Scott with Triple Trout.
Okay.
Those two would be my two. They are the ones that I consider the OGs of the resin swim bait world. They started it. There's a story in there that one of my friends was in the boat with Scott, and Jerry. They were fishing. I don't want to say the lake. I'm not even sure what it is, but in California, and they were trolling a generic 13-inch Rego trout made of wood with fins, which is even harder to do. And they caught a 17-pound fish trolling, and who was Terry, Scott, Jerry, and a cousin of one of those two. There was 4 guys in a boat, and they caught that fish, and then they went to some restaurant, and they said, how can we figure out how to make these baits faster and not out of wood? And Terry brought up a post that I made on the Bass Fishing homepage about making a spinnerbait out of plaster of Paris and pouring lead in it. And he passed the idea on to Jerry and said, why don't you use resin and silicone? So the story that as I understand it, and it's secondhand, Jerry took a toilet paper roll, put putty around the base, filled the toilet paper roll full of resin. So and then when it dried, he peeled the cardboard off the toilet paper roll, and he had a round cylinder of resin, hard resin, and he carved the first rat out of resin out of that toilet paper roll. And that is my understanding of how the resin industry started with Jerry and then Scott. They were partners at one time, is my understanding. Yeah, Scott Whitmer, and that's how things started. So Jerry's rat was first, and then Scott had a bunch of his triple trout, and he still makes them today. So those two were the OGs, and both of those guys, especially Jerry, are extremely good, accomplished fishermen. So I have all the respect in the world for those guys for who started this industry as I know it. And so, but those would be my two inspirational builders, and I've met either one of them. So hopefully one day I will get to meet them. I'll probably go out to California or something. I think Jerry still lives in Nevada somewhere, I think, and then I think Scott lives in Texas now, or Arizona or something. I'm not sure where they are. So
there's been some good interviews with Jerry on the Big Bass podcast that I've listened to. But yeah, definitely Bobby Boss. I love having guys like Mike and Gary, and I've got a few other ones, guys that, you know, I think it's good from my perspective because I love everything about bass fishing, from the big baits to the little baits to the tournaments to everything. And I think it's great to get these stories and information documented. And I think that as much as the negative side of the internet can rear its head, I think this is the great side of the internet, is that we can get these things documented for people to watch tomorrow, next week, 20 years from now, great grandkids can check this stuff out, whether it's people in the audience or Mike's kin. Like, I think it's just awesome. So,
yep, I agree, 100%. 100%.
I guess we haven't really talked I guess what's the biggest bass you've caught on your baits?
I've caught 3 over 10 on a bull shad.
Nice.
4 now. I got one last year. I got one on a glide, and then I've caught some in Mexico.
Sure,
that counts. So that's. I think I've caught 2 in Mexico on a bull shad, and then 4 here, so 6 total, something like that.
What about
a handful? I don't care. Yeah, I'm still trying to get a team fish, so I'm here in Georgia it's tough. There's just not a lot of opportunities to catch tens and stuff. They're here, they're 100% here. They're just not very big numbers. I don't have Texas waters or California waters, or even those guys it's very tough to catch them out there. We just don't have them in any kind of numbers here. Even though the world record was caught in South Georgia, we can't.
Allegedly.
I don't think that's legit. There are doubts about that. So, yeah, it's just weird. So, but we have a lot of 6 to 8 pound fish. Not a lot, but I actually caught 2 of the tens out of Alatoona, Tris. Yeah, actually, that was my first one, and it was caught, right there by the dam. I've got 3 6-pound spots somewhere in there, upper 5s, both on Lanier. Both on Alatoona, but I've actually caught some good ones on Lanier, not as big as the ones I've caught on Alatoona. I just don't get to Lanier as much. Lanier's a fantastic fishery. Yeah. I don't know why I don't go there more often. It just, it's an awesome spotted bass lake. But both Lanier and Alatoona are extremely good, what I consider good swim bait lakes, once you learn how to fish them. You could go fish for largemouth or on both of them and catch them. Of course, it gets harder as the year goes on, but with the herring and stuff, it's making it a lot more interesting, for sure. The fishing have improved greatly with the herring introduction that we've had. And I'll start doing some videos and stuff from Alatoona before too long. And so, all those holes are public holes anyway. So it's not like I'm giving out anything that I can't show. So, but yeah, I love Alatoona. It's a great lake. I live 5 minutes from the ramp roughly. So, but I'm gonna start doing some videos out there. But I'm in striper mode right now, and we're catching some big stripers and stuff in the rivers and creeks and stuff. So, but yeah, good question, Chris.
Awesome. What I guess following up, what's the biggest bass that's been caught on your baits or that people have told you about? I
think Vance McCullers has got 2 over 14. He's Florida. He's caught 2. He caught 2 of them in a row. not in a row, but back-to-back days almost, two giant fish. He caught one of them on an 11-inch bull shad, and he caught the other one on a 7-inch bluegill. I'm trying to think if there's any other monster fish. I know Jim Fallon on here, he's caught some in the 11-pound range. Multiple tens, multiple
I mean,
tens.
probably hundreds of
Yeah.
and tens, I would assume. Yeah.
Over the course of the years, yes. But yeah, 214s, I think, is I call them the Twin Towers. They're actually, I think, if you go to a Bull Shad Facebook page, there's a picture of them at the cover photo at the top. So,
Hold on. Yeah, Tim, thanks for the super chat. Not needed, but appreciated.
thank you, Tim. And Bobby, I agree on the baby bull shad. I mean, they have done extremely well for us. I even fish them still, and I fished them last week when I went to Florida for the peacocks. They love them down there. It was one of, we did that bait 4 years ago, and they're still doing very well for us. There you go. There's the two big ones that he got. Yeah, I mean, they were one of Dick's top 3 sellers for 2 years. So they did extremely well. At the time, they were the highest priced bait that Dick's ever carried, and they were very reluctant to carry it because of the price point. So, we're very thankful that they did it, but it just showed that, taking a chance on us. I appreciate that they did that, but we did really well with the baby bull shad, and still to this day, that's a testament that, a lot of people did start, make a bait over a year. Usually the shelf life of an ABS bait is a year and a half or 2 years, and then it just goes away. But we're still here 4 years later, so that's awesome. So, yeah.
Very cool. I've enjoyed the conversation tonight. It's about as much fun as I expected it to be.
Absolutely.
Kayak Bass Fishing. Love the channel. I don't even know who's in the Stanley Cup. I really didn't follow it when the Wilds were out. Not related to Sam Bennett on the Panthers. So I was pretty in tune with the Timberwolves until they got bounced. But yeah, a lot of people saying they enjoyed the show tonight. So
thank you.
Yeah. Love
Tim,
doing this show.
you need to go fish for peas. Those are a blast. We go down there every year to the Everglades. It's absolute hoop. And, it's not an easy thing to do, but once you're on them, you're on them. I mean, they are everywhere, usually Fort Lauderdale area and, a little bit south, a little bit north, all the way to Ida, all the way to south to just north of Homestead. And the Everglades is usually their breeding ground for the peacocks. But it's a blast. I mean, we go down. I take my boy down there every year. He loves for those peas. And they had a freeze down there 2 years ago, and they killed a lot of the big ones because they're very intolerant to temperature. Once those water temperatures get in the 60s, the peas don't do very well. So they start to die off. But that's the only place in the United States that you can get them. You can get them in Hawaii a little bit, but very aggressive fish, very aggressive. They're beautiful, beautiful, and they hit bass lures, they hit guys, they hit everything. So a lot of fun.
So you got a series of public lakes that you like to hit in the area, and you kind of bring your boat down there, or do you hire guides, or what? How do you approach it down there?
4 or 5 years ago, the first day we went down there, we hired a guide, just to shorten the learning curve. If you're going to spend $400, $500 bringing a boat down there, you need to at least learn something, And we went with a guy the first time. We went with Patrick on Ida, and we caught some clown mice and we caught some peas. And after that, we've been on our own. We've had some local help, the ponds and stuff behind apartment complexes and stuff, but they're in every little ditch canal that you can find down there. So just doing some research online. After that, I just basically branched off and just did fishing like you're doing for bass. You can sight fish them very easily. If the one thing you need to learn about peas is they like rocks. If you can find riprap type rocks, shallow shelf rocks, you can't miss them. And they get up shallow March through July, and you'll see them spawning, and you'll see them up top. They're very easy to see. But the one thing you'll be surprised about Florida, if you haven't fished there, is they've got a ton of exotic fish out there. They've got Oscars, jaguars, cichlids. I mean, all spotted sunfish, all sorts of weird, and they're fun to catch. They're very, very tilapia. They fight like hell, but it's not that difficult once you find them. It's the hard part is finding them first, and just knowing where to go. But Ida Chain, Everglades, Snapper, Blue Lagoon, Snapper Creek area, and then also Aerojet, and then the Falls Mall area. Those are the five places to go. And it's totally different than any other place you've ever fished, and it's beautiful down there. You got those, I don't know what those red flower trees are stunning to look at. And mangoes and limes and all coconuts and all sorts of stuff, and the iguanas, and haven't seen a python yet, but I'm sure we'll be close. But a lot of fun.
And you might catch a few largemouth too.
Yeah. They're about 2 to 3 pounds now. Some approaching 4 because of the dial. But next year or two, they should start getting back to 5 pounds again. We caught them a couple of years ago in the 5 pound range. My son caught one about 5.5, and we got it mounted for him, a replica. But hopefully they'll come back. They're just very prevalent to the freezes. If you don't have any long-term freezes, you're good. So.
Right on. Well, good. If you guys got questions, like you said, you can always reach out to Bull Shad on social media. They're really good about getting back, and most of that comes from Mike. I think we covered a ton. We'll probably do this again in the future. I enjoyed it. It was a ton of fun. Hopefully I'll make it down to Fort Worth, say hi again, grab some of the new baits.
Gotcha.
But
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, it was awesome. So if you guys came in late, catch the replay, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube or wherever it was, or MP3. Tons of good information. And as always, to help you guys catch more big bass and suck less.
Good night.